I'm Jaelin and I'm a certified nurse midwife. Welcome to my blog. We are still working out the kinks of our video blog, so you might hear my husband Ted in the background asking me questions that have come through to sheis.com. So that's who you're going to be hearing.
Hello.
I want to talk to you a little bit why I think midwifery care is the answer to a huge problem we have in the United States. What you might not know is that midwives take care of women during pregnancy and after pregnancy in other parts of the world exclusively. Women don't go see a doctor unless they have a high-risk pregnancy, unless there's an issue going on and they may need a surgeon, and that's what obstetricians are. They're surgeons. Here in the United States, our C-section rate is 33% in hospitals. If you look at midwifery care with midwives in out-of-hospital settings, home birth, and birth centers, you will see that our C-section rate is 6%. That's a huge difference. The World Health Organization feels that C-section rate should be at least 15% or below, and that is the average of most industrialized countries. We know all the right things to do in this country to produce better outcomes, but it doesn't happen in the hospital system. It's my personal opinion. I think it's more profit motivated. A hospital gets paid the same amount of money for a vaginal birth no matter how long the woman's there. So if someone comes into labor and it's early labor and they get admitted and their labor takes more than 24 hours, they're not going to get paid anymore, the hospital or the doctor. They get paid the same amount whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours. It doesn't matter. Where in a birth center environment, you're going to have the opportunity to labor at your own pace and do what your body does, as long as mom and baby are all doing well, and that means your blood pressure's good, the baby's heart tones are good, and there's no fevers, everything's going normal, then there's no reason to put a time limit on your labor.
So I remember when we were having our children, you labored, the nurses labored you, and the doctor basically came in and delivered or caught the baby. How's a midwife different?
So we don't just come in and catch a baby. Midwives help you through this process. Typically in an out-of-hospital setting, your midwife is going to be attending you when we call you an active phase of labor. So that's when your contractions are less than 5 minutes apart. They're lasting a minute long for an hour or two. And that varies between person and person. And that'll be between you and your midwife when that stage comes. And then we're there to help you through the rest of that process of labor and delivering your baby.
So how do midwives differ from doulas?
Well, we have complete training to monitor for anything going wrong and how to handle any of those situations that come our way. Doulas are all about your comfort and your care and just about support only, not medical care whatsoever.
So doula is kind of a coach advocate for the patient.
Absolutely. I love doulas. I think they do a great job. Women who use doulas have better outcomes in the hospitals than women who don't. So go doulas.
So midwives, are they strictly for home births?
No, certified nurse midwives work in all kinds of settings. They work in the hospital, they work at birth centers, and they do home births. There's differences in care, I think, between the three. I find that midwives that work in the hospitals, though they're probably a little bit better than physicians and they do have a little bit better outcomes, not completely, because they're still tied to the hospital and medical model of care. They're still on a time limit. They're still inducing. They're still not laboring you. Usually they still come in and catch. Usually the nurses still do that. So it's not the same intimate care that you're going to get at a birth center or at a hospital birth. I think the biggest difference between birth centers and home birth is that some people want to get out of their home and be in a home-like environment, but they don't have the distractions of home. And some people would rather be in labor and have birth and stay at home through the whole process. So they're just slightly different in care.
So as a father, and having spoken to some of your fathers, I know that one of the big concerns that they have has to do with what if there's an emergency. and I know you work in a birth center. So can you talk a little bit about just if there is an emergency, like, what do you do?
So if there's an emergency, and probably the biggest emergencies that we deal with, and it's really on a small scale to be honest with you, transfer rate in birth centers vary between 2 and 4% a year. So that's pretty small, so we don't see a lot of emergencies. But when we do, most birth centers that I know of have a plan in place. So we are trained to handle a postpartum hemorrhage. We always have the medications that we need right on board: IVs, Pitocin, Methergin. They're all there ready and waiting for our teams practice these drills, so we know how to handle the postpartum hemorrhage and anything that goes on with baby. If baby's born and needs help breathing, then we're trained and we do drills and we practice these things, and we know how to handle this emergency. Typically, birth centers over home births have a little better response time, so if you have to call emergency medical services, they're usually there at a birth center quicker because they tend to be in more centralized areas in the city, where home births can be really way out in the boondocks. So those emergency services may be a little bit more challenging to get to you quickly. And in the cities or even rural towns, you even tend to be at a birth center closer to your hospitals as well.
I've got to imagine that midwives that are doing home births take that emergency response into consideration when they're setting things up for the home birth.
Absolutely. The midwives I know that do home births, they have a whole plan in place. They know how far the hospital is, how long it's going to take EMS to get there. They know what hospital they're going to go to if they have to go in the hospital. And that's all written down in a plan and in place, and usually recommended to put someplace in the home that everyone knows where that is and where that information is.
So, do midwives only deal with pregnancy and birth?
No. Certified nurse midwives do complete women's health care. So from the time you start your first period until you die, we do complete health care. Where other midwives that aren't certified nurse midwives, and that's a whole nother blog, and I'm happy to discuss that another time, but there are other midwives there that just do prenatal care.
Okay, that's all the questions we have on this subject.
Thank you for tuning in to my blog. I look forward to any further questions or clarifications you may need on this subject. Feel free to email me at Jaelin, Jaelin, at sheis.com.
I am woman, hear me roll in numbers 2